keep you waiting, but that music just is that good. And Jerry Bonkowski of NBCSports.com is worth waiting for. He's been giving us the motorsports rundown here for, I guess, better part of a year now. And I don't know, I saw this story coming out, and because it's Martinsville, which is a track that Jeff Gordon always, competed well in and such. I wanted to ask, have you heard what are these rumors about the old guard returning? Have you heard anything about Gordon, getting back behind the wheel of a race car or so? I've heard some sort of rumor about that. What can you tell me?
Well, the rumor is that Jeff might, and again, I stress the word might, race in the Camping World Truck Series race in the fall. I'm not sure that they were going to even have a truck race in the fall, but the rumor was that he was going to race in the truck race at Martinsville, and apparently that's still a rumor at this point. I have not heard anything to the contrary, but I'd love to see him in a truck at Martinsville. I think that would be a fantastic thing, or maybe for that matter, a truck in Bristol. I think that'd be a great to see him there. I mean, the thing is, when you're a race car driver, when you retire, it's sometimes very difficult for a driver to, walk away entirely. And, if you can run, do a one-off here or one-off there, that can have a lot of appeal to a driver. I mean, look at Dale Jr. I mean, he's going to race in a couple of Xfinity races this year, but I mean, he's still quote unquote retired. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Stewart at some point, if Jeff Gordon gets in a truck, maybe Tony Stewart might get into a truck too. So it's just these guys love the competition, and once that competition is gone, there's kind of a void there, and they a lot of guys don't come back, but if you have an opportunity where you could come back for a race or two, and maybe in a smaller series where the ramifications aren't that as hard, if you will, as the Cup Series, why not? If you can have a little fun, hey, why not? Go for it.
Well, the Truck Series, I've thought, has been very fun, be it the color schemes and all this, but yeah, it is run early. It's the matinee. To me, I have some difficulty sometimes watching it. Who's driving and all this? What could a Gordon, or you mentioned a Stewart, who I know had some plans on driving, I think it was World of Outlaws cars at one point, right, and such. What would it mean to the Truck Series to be able to have, say, all-stars of the past drive in the series? I mean, yeah, I could see myself watching a little bit more, but how big could that be a thing, is what I'm asking.
It could be a thing. It could be a big thing. I mean, the Camping World Truck Series has been around for quite a long time here, and it's still very popular, with certain segments of the fan world out there. But when you add the names of, let's say, Jeff Gordon or Tony Stewart or Dale Earnhardt Jr. Potentially, I mean, that would increase the attention so much. It would increase the media attention. The fan interest would be there. A lot of fans, who might not otherwise want to go to a race, all of a sudden say, "Hey, I can see Jeff Gordon race again or Tony Stewart race again. Sure, it's a truck, but there's still, excuse me, there's still going to be racing again." Fans would jump at that, and I think the media outlets would certainly jump at it. It would be a win-win for everybody, in my opinion.
Well, we're talking to Jerry Bonkowski of NBCSports.com. A story I read here during the week was how, I guess, BK Motorsports declared bankruptcy, and it was they had all these expenses, but they were only bringing in a fraction of the sponsorship. Okay, same old story and all this, but what we are seeing are fewer cars on the track now. Now, when we're talking about a Martinsville, I used to always have a problem. I got to tell you, when Bristol, that half mile, went from 37 cars to 42, I said, I know fans like Rex, but this is ridiculous. And I was concerned about the safety. Could it be a good thing that we're only that we'll have fewer drivers on the track, and maybe in that way more stars, if you will? At least, if you have 10 stars on a 35 car field or so, they're that much bigger, in my opinion. If you follow where I'm going with this, Jerry, my question is it a good thing maybe that there could be fewer cars on the track in Martinsville?
No, actually, I didn't.
Okay.
I'll explain tell you why. Fans are fans, and they have any number of reasons or lures, whatever word you want to use, to come out to a racetrack, and such as Martinsville. And there are fans certainly of a guy like Jimmy Johnson. There are fans of a guy like Jeffrey Earnhardt. That's a very wide spectrum of drivers out there. And the fewer drivers that are in the race, in my opinion, makes for a lesser of a race. I mean, if your limit is 40, you should have 40 in the field. And it's not really a safety issue, in my opinion, it's on such a short track, like a Martinsville or like a Bristol, because let's face it, they're only typically running somewhere in the range of maybe at Martinsville maybe 95 to 110. Bristol pretty much the same thing. So the safety equipment is such that the risk is a lot lower than if you're doing 200 miles an hour at a Daytona or a Michigan or a Texas, someplace like that. So I think that I've never really been a fan of seeing fields cut. I mean, I can understand if some teams don't show up. That's their choice. I get that. But I guess I'm a purist in the sense that I want to see as many cars within the limit that we can. So if we can if the limit's 40, I'd love to see 40. If we get 39, we get 39. But bringing it down to 35 or so, I don't know if that really enhances the star power or the star attraction for the big names. If anything, I think it just increases their chances of having better success because there's fewer cars in the field, and I don't know if that's really a good thing in my opinion.
I guess one of the things that I look at is I remember the Daytona 500. And there was the 66-year-old journeyman driver, and his name escapes me. If you can help me out, it was sort of the back of the field. And they said, well, what do you think you're going to do here in the Daytona 500? This is his last race. He said, well, I'm going to try to stay out of the way and run at the back of the pack. And I'm thinking, well, why is he out there then? I mean, except, tip of the cap to a journeyman career or so. I just say, I've always had the problem with the driver that aren't out there to win. Or that don't really have a legitimate chance to win, bogging things up. And I guess that's where my feel was. And also just, look, isn't it a little bit, you mentioned the safety factors and all that. Maybe not so much, especially with modern day, safety equipment. But it would seem to me you're going to have more wrecks if you got 42 cars out there than you would 37 or so. I know.
Well, but Marky, the way I look at it is this. If a team is willing to, put together an effort to come to a race, if they can qualify for the race, they have every right to race in the race. They may not be able to win, but they if they essentially check off all the boxes that's required of them to make the race, yeah, I'd say give them a chance. I mean, if they can only last 40 laps, they last 40 laps. But I mean, the Daytona analogy you made, though, that's a little bit of a different ballgame, though, because if you make the field and you're not really going to have any good chance of winning, you're there for probably for the most part for the paycheck you're going to get out there. I mean, even if you're finished last, you're still going to get a decent paycheck out of a place like Daytona. And I can think you're not going to get it in other places, but I think you see where I'm going with this. So
yeah,
it's just a matter of if you have the opportunity, if you have the equipment, if you have the driver, you have the team, and you qualify and make the field, I think you have every right to at least start the race. Although you may not finish it, though.
I want to go on. We're taking this into a different place and all this, but I noticed that drivers are being sent to pasture. I mean, we're talking about a potential Jeff Gordon comeback, and really, it seems to me that Jeff Gordon is not way past his prime or anything of that nature. He was just recently pinch hitting and doing reasonably well for Little E just a couple of years ago and such. But I'm reminded of, say, going back to 1990, J.D. McDuffie dying in the wreck in Pocono. And I remember all the stories and all the memories, and it was, well, he's 50 years old, but he never had the money to really win, and now he's dead, and, he never won a race and all this. And my thought was, if you were 50 and you'd been driving as long as J.D. McDuffie and you hadn't won, maybe there's a safety issue here for not only yourself, but everybody else. And that, yeah, you should be going to a younger man. Now, if you're still winning at 50, it's a different story in all this. But, one could even argue that about Dale Earnhardt, because the last 5 years, despite his 98 victory in the Daytona 500, he wasn't quite the same driver that he had been before. He won a year without a victory, for instance. And you follow what I'm saying? I see now, do you think that drivers now are being sent to pasture a little bit sooner so that we wouldn't have, say, a J.D. McDuffie tragedy again?
I wouldn't say they're being sent to pasture earlier. I think that, for the most part, and I'm saying this is my opinion, for the most part, the drivers themselves are controlling when they want to walk away from the sport. Now, there, of course, are exceptions. I mean, perfect example is Matt Kenseth, Greg Biffle.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two examples. I mean, there just wasn't a spot for them, in the, subsequent years, so they, just kind of, faded away, if you will. So, I think that I'm a very big history buff on the sport. I'm also very much of a purist. You know that as well as I do.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you start saying, maybe we should put limitations on certain drivers because, either they're not competitive or they're older or they haven't won, that gets, to me, that treads in very dangerous territory because, if you start eliminating certain people who at least have the wherewithal and the equipment to at least, qualify for a race, where do you draw the line at, down the road? You see what I'm saying? I mean, basically NASCAR always has been and has prided itself in being a series that, excuse me, if you have the money, the equipment, the driver, the team, the owner, you're able to race. And, if you don't make a race, the only reason you don't make it is because you fail to qualify. And there may be more cars than, to attempt to qualify than there are, for a 40-car field. That's the only way, they eliminate. So I get real skittish, if you will, when I start hearing people say, well, maybe we should eliminate this kind of group or this kind of group or this kind of group, be it for age or performance, lack of wins, whatever. I get real skittish about that kind of thing. I think that everybody who has a chance and wants a chance and needs a chance and can have the chance should have the chance. But I also see your point too, Marky, that, certain elements kind of add up. Yeah, there may be a certain, they may be perceptually, what was the word I'm looking for? There may be a perception that there could be a safety issue, and then that's something that NASCAR has to take a look at. But honestly, I can't think of, any time in the last 20-plus years I've been covering the sport where NASCAR has intentionally overruled a driver from coming in, from racing for whatever reason.
Okay. Now, you were tweeting out, and you had some big news about IndyCar and a relationship with NBC Sports. I think that all the races next year are going to be broadcast by NBC. Is Indy now poised to make a comeback?
I think they've been making a comeback. I mean, honestly, their ratings have been climbing over the last several years. Fans are getting more interested. I mean, the 2016 Indianapolis 500 was the 100th anniversary race, 100th running of the race, rather, and, they had over 350,000 fans in those stands. I mean, it was, for a guy like me who's been covering the sport for such a long time, and I include both IndyCar and NASCAR drag races, I've been doing this for over 30 years, Marky, and, when I was at the 500 in 16, it kind of almost brought a tear to my eyes because it was so nice and so good to see that place packed the rafters. I mean, yes, it was a monumental or a milestone rather race that people wanted to be part of, saying that they were at the 100th running of the Indy 500. But overall, you definitely can see that there has been an increase in notoriety, attention, success, the size of the field, teams coming in, and we have 3 new teams this year in the IndyCar series. So I mean, it was such a good thing to see that NBC, and even though I work for NBC, and you obviously working for NBC too, it was a good thing to see that NBC stepped forward and they be at and when they're going to be at. It has a little bit more continuity to it. And I just think it's, even if I wasn't working for NBC, I still could consider it a win-win for IndyCar, a win-win for NBC, and a win-win certainly for the fans as well.
We're talking to Jerry Bonkowski of NBCSports.com. Let's go back to NASCAR now. Martinsville, you like the hot dogs. Everyone likes the hot dogs, I guess, is what you're telling me here. A bull ring, we know that. But, the race is sponsored by STP. So I got to ask, does Bubba Wallace have a chance to win this thing?
Yes, definitely.
Wow. Now, that would be romantic, wouldn't it?
It would be. And remember, Bubba won, he won the truck race there a few years back. So, I mean, he loves that track. I mean, he's a born and raised short track racer. So, anybody whose roots come from the short track ranks loves to race at a place like Martinsville. But I will say there's one caveat that fans are going to have to pay attention to. It's the weather. I've been, a friend of mine and I were talking a few days ago, and he was saying that the temperatures could actually be, and don't be surprised, but it's in the high 20s on race day. And then there's also the talk about maybe rain in the focus, or in the forecast rather. I looked at the forecast last night. It seems like it's gotten a little bit better, but still, like for example, Saturday, tomorrow, I don't think we're going to have any races in Martinsville because it said 100% chance of rain throughout the entire day. Now, that being said, though, a big change with Martinsville of late in the last year is they install lights. So they could potentially run a race Sunday night if need be, rather than in the afternoon, because they could wait out the storm and that kind of thing if it's not dangerous for the fans that will be waiting and all that kind of thing. So I think that it's going to be a good race. Hopefully it will be held on the same day and it's not pushed back to Monday or Tuesday. But Martinsville, it's a race that a lot of people like, and it's probably the biggest connection we have to old-time NASCAR as well, too. And I think that's another reason why it's so popular with fans.
Even more so than Darlington?
Yeah, I think because Martinsville is the oldest track. It actually,
Okay.
I believe, by a year or two. And Darlington is a 1.366 mile, egg-shaped mile, a 1.366 mile egg-shaped track. So that's a little bit bigger, whereas we've got a little bull ring here of about a half a mile, much like Bristol is. And I think that it's the oldest track that is out there in the circuit. The drivers love coming there, the fans love coming there. Yes, there was a downturn in attendance, 8-10 years ago, and that actually was for all of NASCAR. But Martinsville seemed to get a big impact out of that. But now it's become one of the more popular tracks. The prices are reasonable. It's fairly centrally located between Charlotte, Raleigh, Richmond. It's all within about a 3 or 4 hour drive. So it's kind of coming back, if you will. And obviously the track believes that because they install lights, which is a very expensive proposition. And they're talking about the possibility that they could come close to a sellout. Hey, that's good news for everybody there.
Well, who's going to win? Is it going to be Bubba?
What's that?
Who's going to win? Is it going to be Bubba?
It could be Bubba, but I'm going to ride the horse I've been riding almost all season. I didn't ride him last week because I took Kyle Larson. Didn't work out, obviously. But I'm going to go with Jimmy Johnson. Because remember, you mentioned earlier about how good Jeff Gordon was at Martinsville. I think he has 9 wins there. Jimmy, I believe, has 8. So Jimmy knows how to get around that place, and he needs a win desperately.
Yeah.
He finished with a 9th last week, but if he gets a win, that should turn things around for him and his team.
I would like to see Jimmy Johnson do well. I'm waiting for him here, and I've always, perhaps the most underrated or underappreciated driver in NASCAR history, Jimmy Johnson. Debatable maybe, but you know where I'm going with that. And you got to put him on a Mount Rushmore of the sport, right? But I don't know if he's one of the 4 most popular guys even today. So what's going on here? Anyway, we know what's going on with Jerry Bonkowski of NBCSports.com. Aces! We'll talk to you after the race. Tri-City Sports Now. Would you like to...